What if we told you that one of the 80s darkest comedies involved a bizarre Hollywood trade that killed a sequel, starred an actress battling cancer who did her own stunts despite being unable to raise her arm, and featured a children's pop-up book that almost got someone strangled? From a song title lawsuit that cost $100,000 to a director who wanted Brian De Palma sitting in a theater seat, Throw Momma from the Train is packed with backstage stories as wild as its plot. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Throw Momma from the Train. Well, fact 1, Hollywood's strangest movie rights swap. When screenwriter Stu Silver wrote Throw Momma from the Train, he made one thing absolutely clear to Orion Pictures. The script wouldn't work without direct references to Alfred Hitchcock's 1951 thriller, Strangers on a Train. The entire plot hinged on Owen watching that specific Hitchcock film and misunderstanding the concept of a murder swap. So the studio had no choice but to secure permission from Warner Brothers, who owned the rights to the Hitchcock classic. But Warner Brothers wasn't exactly eager to cooperate with a competitor, and what followed became one of the most unusual deals in Hollywood history. Orion Pictures found themselves in a bind because without those crucial scenes from Strangers on a Train, Silver refused to move forward with the project, and the whole movie would fall apart. Warner Brothers held all the cards, and they knew it. During negotiations, someone at Warner Brothers realized that Orion's production company, owned by producer Larry Bresner, held joint ownership of the rights to the 1981 hit comedy Arthur, starring Dudley Moore. Warner Brothers had been wanting to make a sequel but couldn't proceed without getting those rights back. So the two studios struck a deal. Orion could use footage and the premise from Strangers on a Train in exchange for Warner Brothers getting full control to make Arthur 2 on the rocks. The irony of this trade is almost painful. Arthur 2 on the Rocks was released in 1988 and became a complete box office disaster, earning terrible reviews and losing money for Warner Brothers. Meanwhile, our Throw Momma from the Train became the 13th most successful movie of 1987, bringing in almost $58 million worldwide. Warner Brothers essentially traded away a hit for a flop, all because they wanted to make a sequel that nobody asked for. It remains one of the strangest and most lopsided movie rights exchanges in Hollywood history, proving that sometimes the cards you're dealt aren't as valuable as the ones you give away. Fact 2. Anne Ramsey only had 10 minutes. When you think about Throw Momma from the Train, the first thing that probably comes to mind is Anne Ramsey's terrifying performance as the nasty, abusive Mama Lift, and that's exactly what makes this fact so surprising. So, despite creating one of the most memorable movie villains of the 1980s and earning herself an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, Anne Ramsey actually appears on screen for only 10 minutes total in the entire film. That's right, just 10 minutes out of an 88-minute movie, yet her presence feels like it dominates the whole story. It's a testament to just how powerful and unforgettable her performance really was that such limited screen time could leave such a massive impact on audiences and critics alike. This incredibly short appearance made Ramsey's Oscar nomination even more remarkable, because Academy voters typically favor performances with much more substantial screen time, but Mama Lift was simply too iconic to ignore. Every single second that Ramsey spent on camera was absolutely packed with venom, cruelty, and dark comedy gold. From her barking orders at her son Owen to get off his fat little behind, to her unforgettable line deliveries like telling Larry that the night was sultry, she commanded attention in a way that few actors ever managed to achieve. The character became so legendary that people who haven't even seen the movie still know about the terrifying Mama Lift, which shows you just how efficiently Ramsey used every moment she had in front of the camera. What makes this even more interesting is that Danny DeVito structured the film so that Mama's limited appearances actually worked in the movie's favor, building up this larger-than-life monster through Owen's stories and reactions before audiences finally met her in person. And by the time she actually shows up on screen, she's already this mythical horror figure in the viewer's mind. And then Ramsey delivers exactly what was promised and more, making every single one of those 10 minutes count for maximum impact. Fact 3. Anne Ramsey was only 15 years older. When you watch Throw Momma from the Train, you see Anne Ramsey playing the ancient, decrepit Mama Lift, a woman so old and worn down by life that she seems to have been terrorizing her middle-aged son Owen for decades. The makeup and her raspy voice sell the illusion perfectly, making her appear to be a woman in her late 70s or early 80s who has been around long enough to become completely bitter and mean. But here's the surprising truth that most viewers never realize. Anne Ramsey was only 15 years older than Danny DeVito in real life. That's right. The woman playing his elderly, domineering mother was barely old enough to actually be his mother at all. Anne Ramsey was born in 1929, while Danny DeVito was born in 1944, which means she was just 43 years old when DeVito was born. By the time they filmed Throw Momma from the Train in 1987, Ramsey was 58 years old and DeVito was 42. In the real world, if Ramsey had been DeVito's actual mother, she would have been a teenager when she gave birth to him, which was certainly possible, but hardly the image of the ancient crone she portrayed on screen. The small age gap makes her transformation into the character even more impressive. Since she had to age herself up significantly through both her physical performance and the way she carried herself throughout the film. The casting choice worked brilliantly because Ramsey understood how to play someone much older than herself, hunching her shoulders, shuffling her feet, and delivering her cruel lines with the weariness of someone who had been alive forever. Her naturally raspy voice, which had been affected by her cancer surgeries, also helped sell the illusion of extreme age. DeVito and the filmmakers never drew attention to the relatively small age difference, and audiences completely bought into the idea that this was a son trapped under the thumb of his impossibly old and impossibly mean mother. Fact 4. Cancer surgery changed her voice forever. Anne Ramsey's distinctive slurred speech, and which became such a memorable part of her performance as Mama Lift, wasn't an acting choice at all. It was the result of a life-threatening battle with cancer that she faced 3 years before the film was made. In 1984, Ramsey was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, and doctors told her that she needed immediate surgery to save her life. The procedure was extensive and devastating, requiring surgeons to remove portions of both her tongue and her jawbone in order to eliminate the cancerous tissue that was threatening to take her life. The surgery took place on Ramsey's 57th birthday, which made the experience even more emotionally difficult for the actress who had spent decades building her career on stage and in small film roles. When doctors removed the breathing tube from her throat after the operation, they asked her to say something to test whether she could still speak at all. Ramsey managed to ask, "What do you want me to say?" and immediately burst into tears when she realized that her voice, though altered, was still functional. The surgeon had reconstructed part of her tongue using tissue taken from her thigh, which allowed her to regain the ability to talk, though her speech would forever carry the slurred quality that audiences would come to know in her final films. For most actors, this kind of surgery would have spelled the end of their careers, but Ramsey refused to give up. She returned to work almost immediately, taking on roles that actually benefited from her new gravelly voice and tough appearance. Her performance as Mama Fratelli in The Goonies in 1985 showcased how she could turn what might have been a career-ending disability into a unique asset that made her characters even more memorable and intimidating. By the time Danny DeVito cast her as Mama Lift 2 years later, that distinctive voice had become her trademark, adding an authentic layer of menace and dark humor to one of cinema's most unforgettable movie mothers. Fact 5. She filmed while undergoing oral surgery. Anne Ramsey's dedication to her role in Throw Momma from the Train went far beyond what anyone would reasonably expect from an actor, especially considering what she was dealing with behind the scenes. While filming the movie in 1987, Ramsey was actively undergoing additional oral surgery and cancer treatments, enduring what director Danny DeVito described as intense, ongoing pain throughout the entire production. Despite the physical agony she was experiencing on a daily basis, DeVito later revealed in interviews that Ramsey never once requested to be excused from work or asked for any special accommodations during the shoot. She simply showed up every day, delivered her performance as the monstrous Mama Lift, and powered through the discomfort without complaint. What makes this even more remarkable is that Ramsey had already been through extensive cancer surgery 3 years earlier in 1984. When doctors removed portions of both her tongue and jawbone to treat her throat cancer. The recovery from that procedure had been brutal, and now, during filming, she was dealing with follow-up treatments that required additional operations on her mouth. The timing couldn't have been worse for taking on a physically demanding role, yet Ramsey threw herself into the part with complete commitment. She even insisted on performing many of her own stunts during the production, despite the fact that her previous surgery had left her physically limited. She couldn't raise her arm above her head due to the medical complications. Production notes from the film reveal that Ramsey ended up with significant bruising from the stunt work, but when asked about it, she simply said she was having more fun than she'd had in years. Her professionalism and toughness impressed everyone on set, and it's part of what made her performance so powerful and unforgettable. And even though she only appears on screen for about 10 minutes total in the finished film. Fact 6. Anne Ramsey slapped DeVito for real. When you watch the scene in Throw Momma from the train where the terrifying Mrs. Lift slaps her son Owen across the face, you're witnessing something completely real. Anne Ramsey didn't hold back or use movie magic for that moment. She actually struck Danny DeVito with full force to make the scene as authentic as possible. This wasn't an accident or a mistake during filming, but rather a deliberate choice that both actors agreed upon to capture the raw brutality of their characters' relationship. According to information from the film's production, Ramsey wanted to make sure that the abusive dynamic between Mama and Owen felt genuine and uncomfortable for audiences to witness. By delivering a real slap instead of the typical Hollywood fake that actors usually perform for the camera, she ensured that DeVito's reaction would be completely natural and that viewers would feel the sting of the moment right along with him. The physicality of that scene became one of many examples throughout the movie that demonstrated just how cruel and domineering Mrs. Lift was toward her middle-aged son. What makes this decision even more remarkable is the context surrounding the production. Ramsey was dealing with serious health issues during filming, having undergone surgery for throat cancer just a few years earlier and continuing to battle the disease while working on the movie. Despite her own physical struggles and pain, she remained committed to delivering the most powerful performance possible, even if that meant physically striking her co-star and director. DeVito later spoke about Ramsey's dedication and professionalism during production, noting that she brought an incredible intensity to every scene she appeared in. The real slap is just one small detail in a performance that would go on to earn Ramsey an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, proving that sometimes the most memorable moments in cinema come from actors who are willing to push boundaries and commit fully to their characters, no matter how unpleasant those characters might be. Fact 7. She died 6 months after Oscar night. Anne Ramsey's performance as the terrifying Mama Lift earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress in 1988, which should have been one of the proudest moments of her long career. She attended the Oscar ceremony that year, walking the red carpet and sitting among Hollywood's elite as her name was called as a nominee. It was a remarkable achievement for an actress who had spent decades working in small roles before finally getting her big break at age 58. But tragically, Anne Ramsey would pass away from throat cancer just 6 months after that glittering awards night on August 11, 1988. She was 59 years old. The cancer that ultimately took her life was the same disease that had already shaped her iconic performance in the film. By the time she attended the Oscars in early 1988, Ramsey's cancer had already returned and was progressing aggressively. She had first been diagnosed in the mid-1980s and had undergone surgery that removed parts of her tongue and jaw, which gave her that distinctive, raspy, slurred voice that made Mama Lift so memorable and unsettling. During the actual filming of Throw Momma from the Train in 1987, she was still undergoing additional oral surgery and dealing with intense pain from her treatments. What makes her Oscar nomination even more bittersweet is that Ramsey knew this role represented the peak of her career, and she gave everything she had to it despite her deteriorating health. Director Danny DeVito later recalled that she never once complained or asked to be excused from the set, even when she was clearly suffering. She also won a Saturn Award for the role and received a Golden Globe nomination. The film was released in December of 1987, and by the following August, she was gone. Her final film appearance was a small cameo in Scrooged with Bill Murray, which came out shortly before her death. giving audiences one last chance to see her unforgettable screen presence. Fact 8. DeVito's coin collection scene was personal. One of the most unexpectedly touching moments in Throw Momma from the Train comes when Owen excitedly shows Larry his coin collection, and it turns out this scene exists because Danny DeVito pulled directly from his own childhood memories. In an interview with Playboy magazine, DeVito revealed that the scene where Owen enthusiastically displays his coins to Larry was inspired by his own habit as a kid of sharing whatever he was collecting at the time with his friends. Whether it was coins, our baseball cards, or some other childhood treasure, young Danny would eagerly show off his collections to anyone who would pay attention, just like Owen does in the film. As both the director and star of the movie, DeVito had complete creative control and insisted that this particular sequence make it into the final cut, even though it doesn't directly advance the murder plot. He felt strongly that the scene was essential to showing Owen's childlike nature and his desperate need for connection and approval. The moment reveals a softer, more vulnerable side of Owen that makes him more than just a bumbling would-be murderer. When Owen lights up while showing Larry his coins, explaining each one with genuine enthusiasm, we see a lonely middle-aged man who never really grew up, are still living in his mother's house and still craving the simple pleasure of sharing something he cares about with a friend. DeVito worked with screenwriter Stu Silver to craft the scene, making sure it captured that specific feeling of childhood excitement mixed with adult loneliness. The scene works beautifully because it grounds Owen's character in something real and relatable, transforming him from a simple comic foil into someone the audience can actually feel sympathy for. It's one of those small directorial choices that shows DeVito understood that even in a dark comedy about murder, the human moments matter most, and sometimes the best scenes come from mining your own memories for emotional truth. Fact 9. The pork line was originally much dirtier. If you've seen Throw Momma from the Train, you probably remember the scene where Billy Crystal's character Larry reads aloud the title of a student's so-called coffee table book manuscript during his creative writing class. The title he announces is 100 Girls I'd Like to Pork, which gets a huge laugh from the audience and perfectly captures the absurdity of Larry's terrible students. But what you might not realize while watching is that Crystal's lips are clearly mouthing a completely different word, and that's because the original line was much more explicit than what made it into the final cut of the film. When the movie was first filmed in 1987, on the student's manuscript was titled 100 Girls I'd Like to Fuck de Chueques, using the actual profanity instead of the slang term pork. The filmmakers shot the scene with Crystal delivering the line exactly as written in the original script, but when it came time to submit the film for an MPAA rating, they ran into a problem. The ratings board determined that including that particular profanity would earn the movie an R rating, which would limit its audience and potentially hurt the film's box office performance. Since Throw Momma from the Train was designed to be a dark comedy with broad appeal rather than an adults-only film, the studio needed to secure a PG-13 rating to reach a wider audience. To fix the issue without reshooting the entire scene, the filmmakers simply dubbed over Crystal's dialogue in post-production, into replacing the F word with pork instead. This solution worked perfectly to satisfy the ratings board and earn the desired PG-13 classification, but it also created a noticeable visual inconsistency that sharp-eyed viewers can spot if they're paying close attention to Crystal's mouth movements during the scene. The dubbed line became even more sanitized when the film aired on commercial television, where pork was changed yet again to bonk to make it even more family-friendly for broadcast audiences, creating 3 different versions of the same joke across different formats. Fact 10. Danny DeVito's father-in-law had a cameo. When you watch Throw Momma from the Train, you might notice a character listed in the credits simply as Mr. Son Perlman, but what makes this small role so interesting is that the actor playing him was actually Danny DeVito's father-in-law in real life. Philip Perlman, who was the father of DeVito's wife, Rhea Perlman, from the television show Cheers, appears in the film in what turned out to be his very first movie role at the age of 68. Before stepping in front of the camera, Philip had spent his entire career working in the toy business, a job he had finally retired from just a few years earlier in the mid-1980s. The role in Throw Momma from the Train marked an unexpected career change that would actually launch Philip into a second act as a character actor, something nobody in the family had probably anticipated when he agreed to do the cameo. What started as a small favor for his son-in-law turned into something much bigger for Philip Perlman. After his appearance in Throw Momma from the Train in 1987, he went on to work with Danny DeVito in several more films over the years, including The War of the Roses, Hoffa, Out of Sight, and Drowning Mona. Philip also became a familiar face on television, most notably appearing in over 30 episodes of Cheers as a character simply known by his real first name, Phil. His character on Cheers even managed to get a few lines over the years, making him a recognizable fixture on the show where his daughter Rhea starred as Carla Tortelli. Philip continued acting well into his later years, and with his final performance coming in 2006 when he appeared in an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, another show starring his son-in-law, Danny DeVito. Philip Perlman passed away in 2015 at the age of 95, having built an entire second career that all began with one small cameo role in a dark comedy about murder. Fact 11. Brian De Palma almost had a theater cameo. Danny DeVito had a clever idea for one of the most important scenes in Throw Momma from the Train, and it involved getting one of Hollywood's most famous thriller directors to sit in a movie theater seat. DeVito wanted Brian De Palma, the legendary director behind films like Carrie, Scarface, and The Untouchables, to make a brief cameo appearance during the scene where Owen watches strangers on a train at the Vista Theater. The cameo would have been a perfect inside joke for film buffs, since De Palma was known as one of the modern masters of suspense who followed in the footsteps of Alfred Hitchcock himself. Having De Palma sitting in the audience watching Hitchcock's classic thriller would have created a neat connection between the old master and one of his most talented disciples, all while Owen sat there completely oblivious to who was around him, misunderstanding everything he was watching on screen. Unfortunately for DeVito and movie trivia lovers everywhere, the cameo never happened because of a simple scheduling conflict. According to production notes from December 1987, De Palma was unavailable for filming due to other work commitments at the time. This was particularly disappointing because the Vista Theater scene was crucial to the entire plot of the movie, as it's the moment when Owen completely misunderstands Larry's advice about watching Hitchcock films to learn about writing murder mysteries. Instead of learning about plot structure and motivation, Owen takes the crisscross murder swap from strangers on a train, literally, and decides to put the plan into action in real life. The scene needed to be funny, dark, and a little bit creepy all at once, and having De Palma sitting there in the background would have added another layer of irony to the whole situation. Without De Palma, the scene still works perfectly well. But film fans can only imagine what might have been if one of Hitchcock's greatest admirers had shown up to watch Owen misinterpret the master's work in such a spectacularly wrong way. Fact 12. A $100,000 song title lawsuit. The movie's title didn't just come out of nowhere. It was actually inspired by a popular song from 1956 called Mama from the Train, A Kiss, written by songwriter Irving Gordon. The song, which was recorded by artists like Patti Page, told a sweet story about saying goodbye to Mama from a train, and the title phrase came from Pennsylvania Dutch dialect, where the grammar structure puts words in a different order than standard English. So, Throw Momma from the Train a Kiss essentially meant Throw Mama a Kiss from the Train, which makes the whole thing a lot less sinister than the movie's plot about actually throwing someone's mother from a moving train. But here's where things got legally complicated. Irving Gordon wasn't thrilled about a major Hollywood studio using his song title for a dark comedy about murder, so he decided to take Orion Pictures to court over it. The lawsuit claimed that the studio had used his intellectual property without proper permission or compensation, and Gordon wanted to be paid for the use of his work. According to reports from January 1988 in the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, Gordon ultimately dropped the lawsuit after Orion agreed to pay him what was rumored to be as much as $100,000, a substantial sum that showed the studio was willing to settle rather than fight it out in court. Interestingly enough, If you look closely at the final film, you'll notice the title spells it as Mama with 2 M's instead of Mama with 1 M like the original song. Nobody ever officially confirmed whether this spelling change was part of the legal settlement with Gordon, but the timing is pretty suspicious. It's possible that changing just 1 letter gave the studio enough legal distance from the original song title while still keeping the reference that audiences would recognize. Either way, that single letter difference might have been worth quite a bit of money in legal fees and settlement costs. Well, fact 13, world premiere in DeVito's hometown. When Danny DeVito was ready to show the world his directorial debut, he didn't choose a fancy Hollywood premiere or a glitzy New York City theater. Instead, he brought the movie home to where it all began. In December of 1987, Throw Momma from the Train had its world premiere at the Paramount Theater in Asbury Park, New Jersey, the very town where DeVito grew up riding bikes, playing baseball, and dreaming about movies at the local theaters. This wasn't just a nostalgic gesture. DeVito and Orion Pictures actually invested real money into renovating the historic theater specifically for this premiere, installing a brand new screen, a state-of-the-art surround sound system, and even building a completely new projection booth to ensure the film would be shown in the best possible quality. For DeVito, this premiere was deeply personal and meaningful because his mother was still alive at the time and able to attend, along with his 2 sisters and their families, plus countless friends and relatives who had known him since childhood. The event transformed into a genuine hometown celebration, with the community coming out to support one of their own who had made it big in Hollywood but never forgot where he came from. DeVito later recalled that it was one of his proudest moments, being able to share his first film as a director with the people who had been there from the very beginning. The Paramount Theater itself held special significance for DeVito because he had spent much of his youth going to movies at the various theaters in Asbury Park, including the Paramount, the Mayfair, the St. James, the Lyric, and the Baronet. Growing up in the 1940s and 50s, these theaters were magical places where his love of cinema first took root. By bringing his premiere back to the Paramount and upgrading its facilities, DeVito was essentially giving back to the place that had sparked his lifelong passion for filmmaking. Fact 14. A real locomotive. Ran back and forth. When it came time to film the climactic train sequence for Throw Momma from the Train, Danny DeVito and his production team didn't settle for using miniatures or special effects that were common in 1987 Hollywood productions. Instead, they went all out and secured a genuine vintage locomotive complete with 5 full-sized passenger cars and a caboose for the dramatic finale where Larry chases Mama through the train and she nearly falls to her death. The entire train sequence was shot over 6 intensive days at the Newhall Farm and Land Company in Valencia, California, which provided the production with access to several miles of winding track that was perfect for capturing the chaotic energy that the scene required. The privately owned locomotive was run back and forth repeatedly along these tracks as the crew filmed from multiple angles to capture every moment of the comedy and tension as the characters struggled with each other aboard the moving train. The decision to use a real train added an authentic weight and movement to the scene that would have been nearly impossible to recreate on a soundstage or with visual effects technology of that era. Anne Ramsey insisted on performing many of her own stunts during these train sequences, despite the fact that she had recently undergone serious cancer surgery that prevented her from raising her arm above her head, and production notes reveal that she endured significant bruising from the physical demands of the stunt work. However, Ramsey was quoted as saying she was having more fun than she had experienced in years, showing her dedication to making the scene as memorable and impactful as possible. The combination of the real locomotive, the winding outdoor track, and the actor's commitment to the physical comedy created one of the most memorable climactic sequences in 1980s comedy films, proving that sometimes practical effects and real locations deliver results that special effects simply cannot match. Fact 15. Owen's pop-up book almost got him killed. The ending of Throw Momma from the Train features one of the most darkly comedic moments in the entire film, and it almost results in Owen getting strangled for the second time in the movie. After spending a year recovering from his ordeal and finally overcoming his writer's block, Larry Donner completes his novel about his experiences with Owen and Mrs. Lift, titling it Throw Momma from the Train. Just as Larry is basking in his accomplishment and preparing for publication, Owen shows up at his door with shocking news. Owen announces that his mother has died of natural causes, but more importantly, he reveals that he too has written and published a book about their shared experiences together. The book is called Mama Owen and Owen's Friend Larry, and it's scheduled to be released in just 2 days. For Larry, this is his worst nightmare coming true all over again. He's already suffered through having his ex-wife Margaret steal his manuscript and become a famous best-selling author while he got nothing. Now it appears that Owen has done the exact same thing, stealing Larry's story and beating him to publication. Larry's rage explodes instantly, and he lunges at Owen, wrapping his hands around his neck and genuinely attempting to strangle him. It's only when Owen manages to show Larry a copy of his book that the truth becomes clear. On Owen's version isn't a serious novel at all. It's a children's pop-up book with bright illustrations and a completely sanitized, kid-friendly retelling of their dark comedy adventure. Instead of attempted murder and psychological terror, Owen's version ends with the 3 characters having a pleasant picnic together in the park. The contrast between Larry's serious literary work and Owen's innocent pop-up book is so absurd that Larry immediately stops his attack, realizing that Owen hasn't actually stolen anything from him. The scene perfectly captures the film's blend of dark humor and unexpected sweetness, showing that even after everything they've been through, Owen remains genuinely innocent and childlike in his worldview.